welcome to another Checiegirl Creations video. So today I will be reviewing the Crawford and Black gouache as well as the Royal Talens Designer Extra Fine Quality White Gouache. So the Crawford and Black brand, is from The Works, which is a UK store, so this is very much for UK viewers. It is a set of 12 12mm tubes. The set is £3, which is 25p per tube, which is pretty good, especially considering like how nice it is to work with these paints. Now these are very much like student quality. I mean, they're pretty cheap, and the Talens gouache is artist quality, so professional quality. So I'll be able to like you'll see the difference in quality like on the swatches, and you can see that I completely finished the Crawford and Black white. And that's the thing with gouache, it's very much like acrylics or oils. You will use up your white first, which is why I got a professional level gouache in white, and the Talens one is light fast at like the highest level. It's got like 3 stars, and it'll be better because the white is brighter and it's more opaque, so it'll also kind of improve the way my other gouache paints work as well. And as I like finish the gouache tubes, I'll just replace it with professional gouache like slowly. But it'll take a while for me to like go through all of these paints, and they're pretty cheap, but considering the price, they're all pretty pigmented. They can be a little chalky. You can see it especially on the black swatch, but it's not too bad. I've never used gouache before, but I really enjoy using this gouache, so I bought it because it wasn't too pricey, and I thought £3, not that much. I don't mind trying it out. And I think it's perfect for trying out gouache. And it's not like how I find when I use like cheap, like the chalky cake watercolors, it's not very enjoyable at all. But I think because gouache is supposed to be opaque anyway, it doesn't matter whether it's opaque or not because it's supposed to be like opaque watercolors. There is acrylic gouache which dries permanently, but that's completely different. Just regular gouache is water soluble, just like watercolors. So I like to kind of use it a bit like oils because I just have more working time, which is really nice. Thing about gouache is kind of like in between acrylics and watercolors. And you can see that most of these paints are pretty opaque. The lemon yellow isn't very, but I suspected that anyway. But yeah, they're all pretty opaque. The colors are white, lemon yellow, yellow ochre, orange, burnt sienna, deep red, burnt umber, violet, sap green, cerulean, ultramarine, and black. And it's some nice colors, but I'll talk more about the color selection later on. And you can see that I did a few like kind of mixing swatches. There will be some photos after like I show you the swatches like on video. There will be some photos of the swatches if you want to pause it. They mix quite nicely, quite cleanly. Like the deep red and the ultramarine are both warm colors, so they mix a really nice purple. Deep red and yellow ochre mix quite a nice orange. Cerulean and lemon mix a really nice kind of green, but because there isn't like a warm and a cold red, I can't really mix that with the lemon yellow and get a very nice orange. I can get a nice-ish orange, but not the kind of clean looking orange I would want. But you still do have orange in this paint set. Now the color selection for me, who's now I'm very used to like mixing my colors. So like within my watercolors, there's a cold and a warm kind of like for each color. So there's a cold and a warm red and blue and yellow. So I'm able to like mix lots of my colors, so I don't really have to use the browns and stuff. But with this, I would have to use the browns, so I would have to use like orange if I'm looking for orange, just maybe kind of adjust it by adding different like yellow or red, which is how I used to work anyway when I first started painting. I'm only now, like especially this year, been mixing more, so I don't really need a whole bunch of like colors. I only really need the primary colors. But for a beginner, like before you really figure out color theory, this set isn't too bad at all. I would definitely recommend this set if you're in the UK and you just want to try it out. I don't want to get a big set because I know a lot of people use Alteza, but this set's always seemed quite big, but this 12 set is quite nice. Now the one thing I want to talk about is the wettability. So basically when you leave your colors on the palette, it dries, and how easy it is to re-wet. The Crawford and Black, it varies. So like the deep red and the black re-wet quite nicely, but say like the sap green, barely re-wet. It just kind of just stays dry. The purple as well is quite tricky to re-wet. So it all depends. But when I compared like the re-wettability with the Talens gouache, it's quite easy. I barely had to work at it and it was re-wet. Now the Talens gouache is, I got it from eBay and it was $9.88 per tube, but I was able to get like 2 for 11 something, so I got a bit of a deal. If that listing is still there, I will put the link in the description below. Everything will be listed below as normal. But yeah, so I will link, I'll also link to the work site as well, just so it's easy for you to find. But yeah, these are pretty nice paints. The layering is pretty good. I even tested it out as well. You'll see in like the part where I did a whole bunch of like color mixing. They layer quite nicely. I can get quite thick opaque layers. But I'll talk more about my techniques later on in the video. I do want to show you a few examples in my sketchbook. I was able to, when I first like started using gouache, I used them in my daily studies. If you've been following me for a while, you probably remember that. So throughout like this little section, you'll see a whole bunch of my daily studies of like anatomy and stuff like that, the hands, eyes, ears, and I was able to get quite good contrast, because I know sometimes gouache, like the dark colors kind of dry lighter and the light colors dry darker, but I was able to get quite nice tonal like studies with these gouaches, which was really nice. So basically I would just use a color and white, so like black and white, burnt sienna and white. It's only like really light colors like lemon yellow and yellow ochre that I was using black with. I don't normally use my black gouache. A lot of artists I watch, I've noticed that they use black gouache a lot, but I kind of use my gouache a little bit like watercolors, so I start off really like watered down and I start to layer up, and I'm so used to not using black with watercolor since I don't have black watercolor. I only have white watercolor. But I very rarely use the black. I do actually use the black in this video because there will be some examples so that you can see how like it works. But yeah, I very rarely use the black, but if you do want much darker colors, you can mix black into it. It's not as if it's going to affect the opaqueness, or should I say the transparency, because this is already supposed to be opaque watercolor anyway. So yeah, you can see throughout the examples like how many tones I was able to get in my studies. And then I've also been doing landscape paintings with them, and sometimes I'll start off with a base of watercolor, or I've used both my chalky watercolors and then my gouache over, because the chalky watercolors aren't very good quality. That was kind of tricky to use, but now that I've gotten like some more watercolors, I've been using my Cotman Winsor Newton watercolors like as a base, and then I use the gouache over top, and that's really nice to use. But you can just literally, if all you have is your gouache, you can just water it down just like watercolors and just layer up, because you can water it down, use it like watercolors, or use it quite thickly as well. I always tend to have my brush like slightly damp, even if I want a thick layer, but you can dry brush as well. Sometimes when I was doing my daily studies, I would dry brush. But yeah, you can use the gouache. I find these gouache really nice in all sorts of like different ways. I also sometimes just use white gouache to add highlights to my watercolor paintings, so that it's nice and opaque. And another thing about gouache, what's so nice about it is because it's opaque, you don't have to plan so much. So like if I'm doing a cloud painting, at some point you do see like my cloud study like page, I can just continue layering up. And all the examples in my sketchbook that you're seeing was using the Crawford and white gouache. In this video, it was the first time I was actually using the Royal Talens gouache. So you can see how good even the Crawford and black white gouache is. I would say why I prefer the Talens one. Not only is it nice and opaque, it's also brighter. I find the Crawford and black one is a bit more of a warmer white, but I like how bright the Talens one is, so I would say I quite like those. But yeah, when you get this set, just trying it out, the white is perfectly fine. It's still nice and opaque considering like the price. You can even see on the black swatch like it's pretty opaque, so that's definitely sufficient for when you're first trying out. And as I said earlier before, as you use up your colors, you can just slowly replace them with better quality paints. So that's what I'm going to plan to do. Now I got a 60 ml tube of the Royal Talens white gouache, just because I knew I'm going to be using that a lot. But with the other colors, I would get their smaller tubes. I think they do 12 millimeter, maybe 20 or like 40 or something, but it's like slowly kind of builds up. 60 is their biggest, and it comes in both white and black. So yeah, I would only get the white in big colors, and I guess if you use black a lot, you can get that in like the big tubes. But the other colors, I would get smaller tubes, especially since it's professional. I barely used any white in these example paintings that you'll see in a little bit. What I noticed was I was barely using any, but with the Crawford and black one, because it's not as pigmented, I had to use quite a bit to layer up. But with this, the Talens one, I barely had to use any to layer up, and sometimes I wouldn't even have to layer that much just because it was so pigmented. And that's the difference between like artist quality and student quality. Student quality have more fillers in it, so that's kind of what makes that chalky texture, because I mean, they're pretty smooth, they're not too bad, but like the Talens one is really smooth, like to the touch. And it's just smoother as well when you apply it. It's a lot more smoother, but you can kind of see how like a slightly chalky some of them are on the black cardstock, a little bit more than you can on the white. But I wouldn't say, I think that's fine. It's totally fine. They mix quite well. I can get quite clean mixes as long as like I mix the right colors together. And yeah, so I probably started the like paintings already. I'm painting on my watercolor block and some black cardstock. I don't have any black watercolor paper, but the black cardstock held up pretty well. It was just 200 GSM, so I just didn't go in with too much water. And I'm only using the gouache. I'm not using any of my watercolors for this. I wanted to show that you can like make something just with these gouaches, and you'll be able to see like how, like especially when I was mixing white with other colors, the white was really overpowering, so I have to get used to not having to use that much white. Unlike with the Crawford and black, you would have to use quite a bit for it to stand out. But yeah, these are pretty good. And oh, I wanted to touch on the reason I like to use my watercolors with my gouache is just because of the colors I find this set is lacking in, for me personally. Now, if I know that, like, say my younger self, when I first started off, if I gotten this set, I wouldn't have thought the colors were lacking at all. So if you're just a beginner, you haven't really got into color theory that much, you don't really mix your colors, and you're just literally starting off and you're just playing around, or if your kid just wants to play around with this stuff, this set is perfectly fine. I wouldn't have seen anything wrong with this set when I first started off. But say, okay, my watercolor set, I have alizarin crimson and then cadmium red pale hue are my reds, so that's a cold and a warm red, which is perfect. And then I have phthalo blue and ultramarine blue, which is a cold and warm blue. And then I have lemon yellow and cadmium yellow hue, which is a cold and a warm yellow. I also have yellow ochre in that set as well. So those are perfect. I've got a warm and a cold version of each primary color, and then I can mix browns and greens and purples and oranges to my heart's content. And I do have sap green, burnt sienna, burnt umber, viridian and white in that set as well. And sometimes I do use those colors, but I very rarely use my browns, just because I can already mix the browns with all the colors that I have, like the primary colors I have. And what I like to do is when I'm doing something with my gouache, especially when it's a landscape or something, like the cerulean is a cool blue, but sometimes I would want like a darker, cool colored sky, so I would use my phthalo blue and then maybe like my cerulean somewhere else where you would need like a cooler blue. So I like to use them together just because it kind of fills in those gaps. But as I like replace colors with my gouache, with like more professional gouache, I can always get the colors that I want, so that I have a more of a balanced set and I have like the right colors. Because like in this set you have a cold and a warm blue, and you also have a cold and a warm yellow. The only thing with yellow ochre is because it's an earthy color, you're going to get earthy mixes with that. But say with cadmium yellow, it's still nice and bright, so you'll still get a warm mix with that. But yeah, so you do have a cold and a warm yellow, but you don't have a cold and a warm red. So that's the only shame. If you had a cold red in this set, I think it would have been perfect. But yeah, but it's nice that it has a burnt sienna, burnt umber, and yellow ochre in there. I like to have those colors. The sap green, I wouldn't say is very sap green. It's a bit bright, but it's still quite a nice green. The ultramarine and cerulean are actually very pretty, especially cerulean is a very nice blue. And the orange and the purple are nice. I quite like this purple. It's quite a nice purple. The orange is okay too. But yeah, so you can totally just adjust these colors like the way I used to work. Say I would take an orange and maybe add more red if I wanted it redder, or more yellow if I wanted it yellower. So yeah, but I think as well, for sometimes like with landscapes, I find I need to use my watercolors more. But if you're doing something more illustrative, like you're playing around with patterns and stuff, and you're not really like following a reference photo or anything, you can totally get away with these colors. Like when I'm playing around with patterns and making patterns in my sketchbook, I don't really use my watercolors because I find these colors are fine. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this for a beginner. In the UK, I don't think you can get these like anywhere else. I'm pretty sure these are just in the UK. I'm not aware of the works being anywhere else. I would definitely recommend. They're great to use. The only thing you would find yourself having to replace soon is your white, because the colors, and you saw when I showed you the tubes, I've done quite a few things with the gouache, especially when I was just doing my daily studies and I was just using like a color and white, and I didn't use up that much. I found that the colors, I think they'll last me a long time, and I don't think I can see myself replacing these paints for quite a while, because they are quite pigmented and they do stretch pretty far. So I might as well talk about the paintings I did. So as you can see, I'm working on white and black. I wanted to show like how like opaque the colors can be on black. And I found actually painting on black was really challenging. I've never actually done that before. So I had to use the Royal Talens white a lot, and the white was very bright. I don't know if you can see clouds or anything yet, but when I put the clouds on the black, it really popped to the point that I think it'll be really fun to do some more like gouache illustrations on black, because it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. Maybe I'll try to like, I wonder if I can make a black base with like acrylic or something. Not sure. But yeah, that was really fun to do, and it was really cool to see like how bright the colors can be made with this like professional white. And yeah, as well, I'm pretty happy with how the illustrations came out. The only thing is, like, I did try to do a tree line and I can't really paint trees yet. I haven't figured out how to do that. I can only really do palm trees, but the mountains I don't mind too much. But I really like how nice it was to be able to add clouds with barely any layers. So like when I did the cloud study with the Crawford and black white, I did have to add quite a few layers, but with the Talens gouache, it was pretty good. Now I know it might sound pricey for $9.88 per tube, but you can always get smaller tubes. I just went for the bigger one so I wouldn't have to keep on buying. I thought this would save me from having to repurchase too often, and it'll last me a long time. Yeah, so I'm kind of worried that I might have overbought by getting 2 tubes, but the nice thing about gouache is it can be re-wetted. So yeah, I think what I might actually do is, because I've run out of white watercolor, I do have a replacement half pan though, but I think just because this does re-wet quite nicely, I might see, like, I might put a blob of paint on the palette and see if I leave it for a few weeks how it reacts, because this might be nice to put into the empty half pan of white into my watercolor set, and I can have white gouache with me, so when I can get back to like painting outdoors, that might be really nice to be able to have some travel gouache, because I barely had to use any water and I was still able to get quite opaque. I find when I re-wet the Crawford and black ones, because I have to use so much water, I don't really get a nice opaque mix of color. If I want to go opaque, I just take straight from the tube, but I was able to get quite opaque with when I re-wetted the Talens gouache. So I might put this in a half pan. And it's also just so nice and smooth. It's so nice. I've never actually used like professional art supplies before. At least, well, maybe I have, but I just don't know about it. And I could instantly see how nice this was just from the swatch, and it was really good. So yeah, I would recommend the Crawford and Black gouache. I would definitely say give the Royal Talens one a look too. That was pretty good. I really enjoyed working with that, and I think the colors would be really nice. I'm looking forward to when I can replace it. I think I'll go with Talens gouache. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed looking at the illustrations. I didn't really talk much about making them, but you can see I just started off with kind of like a watered down and then just slowly layered up. Yeah, nothing much to it really. If you want me to do like another gouache video, like me talking more about like the process and everything, let me know in the comments below. But I pretty much, it's just like watercolors. I start off with a watered down layer and I slowly layer up where I want darker. I did actually add black, and I found it made it kind of murky. It wasn't too bad on the black one, but on the white one I didn't really like it. I find when I add black to things, it always kind of dulls it down, and I like my illustrations to look really bright, which is why I don't tend to use black. That's why I try to like avoid black outlines and everything like that. So yeah, that's the only thing I wish I didn't do, but yeah, that's fine. If you want to use black in your stuff, you can. I just prefer not to. And I did at some point do kind of a bit of a dry brushing technique. You'll see on the mountains where it's a little bit more textured, I just kind of picked up the white with a slightly damp brush and just kind of scraped over. And I used just one round brush for everything. And I was going quite loosely as well. I like my landscapes to look nice and loose. So yeah, let me know if you want me to do another gouache video of me doing illustrations, and I can talk more about my techniques. And yeah, oh, and if you do use gouache, let me know like what kind of gouache you use and why you like it, and let me know if you've ever used this Crawford and Black gouache and if you like it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was really fun to play around with it and to like experiment with the Talens gouache and to see that I can do stuff on black cardstock and white paint. What I really think it will be fun to do is to do stuff on craft paper or just tone paper in general. I think that'll be really fun to do with gouache. Maybe that could be a future video working on like craft cardstock or something. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please do give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Please do click that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. I upload every Friday around 12 p.m. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!